Innovate UK is the delivery side of the competition, so we'll be delivering the aspects of the competition for CCAV and in assistance with Meridian. I'll not go into a lot of detail about Innovate UK. I'll get straight into the meat of it because you've been here for quite a few hours, and the people online have been waiting for quite a little while as well, so thank you for your patience. Anyway, let's move on. Meridian 3, Autonomous Highway, Rural and Parking Test Facilities Scope. Okay, so basically my presentation is going to go through the background and the general aspects, requirements and recommendations and suggestions for what the 4 streams may contain, some common requirements and preferences, what is out of scope, business plans, data management, the funding, because certainly from the first competition that we did, there were a lot of questions that came out about the funding structure. A little bit about funding of Meridian, and then a few other requirements and value for money at the end. What I will like to stress is that we want you to read the scope, we want you to read the guidance for applicants. The guidance for applicants is unique to this competition, so don't think because you've read it before this one will be the same. It isn't, it's different. So please make sure that you do read the guidance for applicants. So, the scope. CCAV is going to invest up to 25 million in projects to develop connected and autonomous vehicle testing infrastructure. And for this competition, we're talking about highways, rural, and parking test facilities. And we want to produce the most effective CAV testing ecosystem in the world here in the UK. We're looking for proposals which will integrate into existing proving grounds and or public road test sites. And the link there is for the link to the actual scope of the competition for those who haven't read it yet or haven't seen it yet. But I'm sure you all have, haven't you? Okay, so I think quite a lot of you will have seen this diagram before. So this is what came out of the call for evidence, which started off the whole program. And we've had phase 1 already. We've seen a little bit about some of the test facilities which have been put into phase 1. So for this competition, we're looking at these 4 streams. The other part of phase 2 is covered by the Meridian 2 competition, so we'll not be covering that here today. So the 4 streams we're looking at, the first one is a controlled test environment for highway intersections. The second stream is up to 2 projects for continuous public test environments, including highway and rural. The third one is for looking at a controlled parking test facility. So again, that's a parking test facility which is not open to the public. And the 4th stream is for up to 2 public parking test environments. In terms of the test facility, if you read the scope, it defines a rectangle that the facility must lie within. What I've done is I've tried to produce a reasonably accurate representation of where the existing test facilities are, which have been funded by CCAV. Those are the ones in red. So there are 4 projects with 6 sites. The reason why I draw attention to this is because one of those is quite clearly overlapping out of the rectangle. So we've allowed that. So what I would say is that if you have a potential site which is not quite in the rectangle, come and talk to us. We're not going to rule it out. We're not going to rule it in, but please come and talk to us if you have any doubts at all about whether you fit into the rectangle. Moving on to some general aspects of the test facility scope. So for each of the streams, we're looking to fund globally significant projects. So these have got to be world-class, world-leading projects. And they're there to test autonomous vehicles in appropriate and realistic environments. We want to test the communications, the V2X, the vehicle to everything. So you should have those capabilities on each of the test sites. And we're looking to be able to test equipment that can interact with CAVs as well, for example, roadside infrastructure. So we're expecting the projects to provide core infrastructure that can support testing of various different modular units. So it need not necessarily be vehicles, it could be parts of vehicles, it could be mule vehicles with systems on, and so on. And We're expecting the core infrastructure to be as future-proofed as possible. We don't know what's going to happen, but we have some ideas as to how things are going to change, particularly on the communication side. So we expect there to be ability to be able to upgrade and future-proof as much as possible. So, for example, if you're putting a communications tower up, make sure there's enough power and enough backhaul to be able to cope with other forms of communication that aren't going in straight away. So the proposal should also detail how the test facility will allow as many different testing scenarios as possible. Obviously, the greater the flexibility, the more usable it is for customers. And obviously, there must be a business model to support that. If you're expecting to sell your services on this test facility, you should have a business plan, you should have a model. Basically, we need you to explain what you expect to do. Preference will be given to proposals which use existing test facilities. Michael's already mentioned this, and the reason for this is to minimize costs. We don't want to start again from scratch. We've got a lot of good facilities around in this country. We want to build on them rather than replicate them. It also gives confidence to potential users of the new facility if it's based at an existing facility that is got a good reputation. Obviously, we need to have a lot of funding coming from industry as well, so that it's very important that we get board level support from those who are involved in the project. These facilities can support the ultra low emission vehicle activities. So, for example, there could be charging infrastructure for perhaps the parking test site, but that is not the core part of this project or this competition. So we're going to limit the funding of any of those types of features to just 5% of the total. If you want to link into other funding structures to provide a greater proportion of, or a larger or more high value part, then that's fine, but it's not going to be funded through this competition. Okay, so moving on to the meat of the presentation, the 4 streams. So stream 1 is the controlled test environment for highway intersections. So we're expecting to invest up to £4 million of funding to support one project, which is a controlled test environment project for highway intersection upgrades. We're expecting the facility to add highway junction features to an existing test track facility which has a representative highway section. So we're not expecting you to build a new highway, we're expecting the facility to be built on an existing test track facility which has a highway-like section already. So we're looking to include slip roads, which may be at the same level, or they may ramp up or ramp down, because obviously those will give different visibility challenges to autonomous vehicles. We're also looking at converging and diverging lanes, particularly ones where the priorities are not clear. We see them on the real highways and real motorways, and they're a challenge. How does an autonomous vehicle know whether it should give way or not if it's not clear? So those are the sorts of things we want to be able to reproduce. So proposals should clarify which features will be created and what are the reasons for those choices. We're also anticipating the ability to be able to recreate other plausible highway obstructions, things like contraflows or rolling roadblocks. And obviously, we're expecting the supporting connectivity infrastructure to be provided as well. The bit I'd like you to take away from this in particular is the summary at the bottom. We expect the facility to be able to recreate conditions known to cause perturbations in highway traffic flow to evaluate the behavior of autonomous vehicles under those conditions in a repeatable manner. So quite what the facility looks like, it's your choice. We expect you to decide the features and what it looks like dependent on what your customers are asking for. So we're not going to define which motorway junctions you need to build. You need to work that out for yourselves. But fundamentally, it needs to meet the requirements of the industry. Okay. Moving on to stream 2. Public test environment for highway and rural. Just to step back for a minute, the reason why we're not putting rural into the controlled environment is because Most of the test tracks have already got roads which are relatively representative of rural. They don't need to have any more. What they're lacking is the motorway junctions. So that's why in the controlled environment, it's just highway. But for the public test environments, we want to cover highway and rural. So for this one, for Stream 2, we're looking to invest up to £16 million to support 2 public test environments. And each one should have a continuous route along highways and should have a rural section. So you can continue to driving from highway onto rural and back again. We expect each facility to be able to monitor any test vehicle and nearby road partners throughout the entire route of the facility. At the moment, we're expecting this will be most likely by video, but if you want to use other technologies, that's fine, as long as they're appropriate. We're expecting the facility to be able to relay live information to the test vehicles regarding variables around the route. So for example, this may include the status of variable message signs, or variable speed limit signs, or traffic lights, for example, on the rural sections. The rural sections themselves should represent challenging, poor, or minimal infrastructure conditions. So these may include poorly defined road edges, so roads with no curbs or lines. It may have sharp bends, it may have humpback bridges, unusual road junctions with poor visibility angles. It might have fords, level crossings, overhanging trees which attenuate the satellite signals from GNS systems, and so on. What features you put in is your choice, but obviously the more the better from the overall testing flexibility point of view. But obviously there's a cost, so you need to make the decision as to where the balance is between cost and numbers of features. Supporting connectivity infrastructures, again, should be provided as appropriate. Again, we're not going to specify what that is, it's for you to decide. And projects which are utilising parts of the strategic road network must work with Highways England to provide evidence of Highways England support. And indeed, Jonathan Clough is going to be talking next about how you interact with Highways England during the proposal stage so that you can work up a proposal which is acceptable to both Highways England and the rest of the project consortium. So in summary, we're expecting the facility to be able to provide realistic, challenging conditions with the ability to determine and quantify any circumstance or condition with sufficient accuracy to be able to recreate that in a computer simulation. So if an autonomous vehicle is going around the test route and it suddenly throws up his hands in horror and says, I can't cope with this, and stops, and it doesn't know why, then the test facility should be able to tell it what were the conditions, or should be able to tell the testers what were the conditions that caused that to happen. It was a dog ran out in front, or it was a bin liner that blew across in front of the vehicle. That's the sort of level of information which is necessary to come back to the tester to say, ah, yes, now I need to go and change my control algorithm to be able to take that into account. So all those different aspects need to be considered and the data provided back to those who are testing. Stream 3 is for the control test environment for parking. So for this stream, we're looking to invest up to £2 million funding into a single realistic controlled parking test facility. So we're expecting this facility to have areas representing roadside or off-road and multi-story car parking. So features may include parallel, perpendicular and herringbone pattern parking bays, problematic bay delineation such as faded lines, broken lines, curbs, posts, hedges, ditches, chain link fences, all the horrible things that current sensor systems struggle with. For the off-road parking, we're expecting to see features such as complex entries and exits, so height restrictions, rising barriers, rising curbs, flow plates, all those sorts of things, which, again, an automated parking system should be able to cope with. The multi-story area should include challenging ramps. So these might be straight ramps with quite aggressive angles. There might be spiral. And there should be challenging and natural and artificial lighting because some of the parking systems will be relying on cameras. There should also be things like supporting pillars. These may be at the front of the bay or at the back of the bay. You might have a ventilation ducting in underground car parks, which goes across the bonnet of where the parking vehicle is parking. So all these are things which you may want to include as features in this particular parking facility. Other things that you may want to consider, bay marking and signage. We've heard about that a little bit already so far today, which either allow or disallow various different types of vehicles. So the vehicle needs to know perhaps that it is a disabled vehicle today, and therefore it is allowed to park in a disabled parking spot, or it has a child seat with a child in it, therefore it can go into a mother and child parking slot. So all these things should be considered for next generation parking systems, which may well obey that sort of signage, where they're reliant on optics of the signage as opposed to being told electronically over the air. We're also expecting that there could be automated EV charging systems. So these might be induction charging in the ground, or there may be robotic arm chargers, which are actually physically plugging into the vehicle. Again, you can put these in, but they shouldn't exceed more than 5% of the total value of the project. So in summary, the facility should challenge current and future automated parking systems in as many realistic ways as possible and in a repeatable manner. Moving on to stream 4, the public parking testing environment. So again, we're looking to invest up to 3 million in total to support up to 2 public parking test facilities. So we expect these facilities to be built on existing public car parking facilities, but we would certainly consider funding additions to a new car park to make it suitable as a test facility. We're not going to fund building a car park, a public car park, because there are so many of them out there already. But if somebody's building one and they want to modify it to make it a testing facility, then we're willing to look at how to modify it. So we would expect the ability to be able to remotely monitor and track test vehicles around that facility. And features which you may want to include or may want to think about: sensor and communications to determine and relay bay vacancy information, automated EV charging we've spoken about, possibly a valet parking drop-off area where the occupants can get out of the vehicle and pass over control to the vehicle to go and park itself. Most car parks don't have a valet parking area to sort of temporarily drop off their occupants. And another thing you may want to consider is locating the facility in an area which supports intermodality. So maybe at an airport or at a railway station. So there is a certain degree of communication and interaction with the public transport system as well. So all these things are possible. We're looking for you to decide what you'd like to do. So in summary, the facility should challenge current and future automated parking systems in as many realistic ways as possible, with the ability to be able to determine and quantify any circumstance or condition with sufficient accuracy to enable recreation in a simulation. So again, something's happened, something a bit weird because it's public. What's happened? Can we recreate it so that can go back into the development of an automated vehicle? Okay, looking at some of the common requirements across all of the streams. So each facility must make available to the user all transient environmental data necessary to reconstruct those scenarios, tests and incidents in simulation. So the obvious ones that this must include are weather and lighting conditions. We've also talked about digital twins, so we're going to make it mandatory to provide a digital twin or at least sufficient topographical data of the facility to allow such a model to be generated by the customer. Such models must be made available to users at a reasonable commercial rate. It's expected that the projects will work with Meridian to ensure similar and common format digital twins or data common with the other testbed projects. And we do have a separate slide for data requirements, which I'll come on to a little later. Looking at common requirements and preferences for the control facilities. Obviously, each control facility must be safe and it must be secure. We don't want the general public straying into it. It should allow the corner case testing, where multiple variables can be reproduced simultaneously at extreme levels in ways that you can't do on the public roads. It should replicate real-world conditions and be demonstrably representative of the target environment in the UK and other appropriate target CAV markets. Now, we appreciate that in the UK, we've got an automotive industry which exports to the world, a lot of the world. So we're not going to say it has to be only representative of UK. Obviously, that's important, but not. We don't want to rule out the ability to be able to reproduce American, German, or Japanese roads or facilities. Again, we expect you to justify why you're designing the facilities that you are designing. So the facility should also make available suitable supporting test equipment, such as other vehicles, which may be connected or automated or not, the ability to physically simulate other road users and objects, for example, pedestrians, cyclists, etc., for the higher risk scenarios where there is a real chance of an impact. And the facility should include options to anticipate for faults in the vehicles and the infrastructure systems. So what happens when a certain failure happens? Looking at some of the common requirements for and preferences for the public test facilities. Again, each public facility must be safe. Obviously, it's not going to be secure because it's public, but it should have suitable systems in place to ensure the safety of both the testing personnel and the general public. Preference will be given to the projects which join to existing public test facilities. So these may or may not be funded by the CCAV through Innovate UK. We've seen the ones or some of the facilities which are funded. We are well aware that there are a number of facilities around which haven't been funded but are equally have other equal value, and attaching to those is perfectly acceptable, as long as they're within the rectangle. Okay, each public test facility should make available to the user all its transient environmental data. We've talked about weather and light, but it should also include information such as the location, velocity, and nature of any interacting road user or transient object on or close to the roadway. Ensure anything which could affect the trajectory of the vehicle or how the control system should change the trajectory of the autonomous vehicle. You should be able to characterize that sufficient to be able to recreate it in the computer model. And the users of the test facility should be made aware of any local conditions or incidents around the facility which may affect the safety or the behavior of the tests. So if a road's flooded, if there's been an accident, there's roadworks, please make sure you have an ability to be able to tell the users, the people who are testing on that road, that is there, because it may invalidate their tests, or it may be a danger. And obviously, when the test facility utilizes public roads, there has to be suitable agreement and approval from the appropriate road authority that is acceptable to them. If it's part of the strategic road network, that's Highways England, we're expecting it to be local authorities or city authorities as well. So for all streams, we're going to give preference to the projects which can deliver operational facilities within the 12 to 18-month timescale and then be open for business the following day. Projects which match the industry funding within that investment stage of the project will also be preferred over the ones that don't. Linked proposals will be considered favourably if they can save costs, improve outcomes. Particularly where there are streams where there are potentially going to be two projects, we don't want them to duplicate each other or replicate each other. We want them to be collaborative so that we can offer different features at the two different sites. So please talk to each other and decide what you're going to do, even with your rivals and competitors. I know that can be painful, but it's worth doing to provide the best outcome for everybody. So a business or research organization may lead the project or must lead the project. And these projects are collaborative, so you have to work with others. But the consortia should not contain more than 5 partners. That's the lead with 4 others. We may be willing to accept change to that, but you need to talk to us and we need to agree that in advance. And again, the requirements for that are described in the scope and in the guidance for applicants. And all projects must submit a collaboration agreement with their proposal document. Sounds obvious, but it is actually quite important in this particular project for reasons which I will come on to in a minute. So what is out of scope? Well, we're not going to fund urban or campus type facilities, with the exception of a public parking facility which may be in an urban environment. So if the public parking facility is partly off-road, partly on-road, and that's an urban environment, that's okay, but we're not going to fund anything else that's in an urban environment. Urban's been done in phase 1. This is for highway and for parking and for rural. So we're not going to do facilities which duplicate or replicate existing facilities in the UK. We want to push forward what's going on, not recreate. We're not doing crash or extreme handling facilities, and we're not doing emissions testing facilities. So if it just so happens that your roadway or your route coincides with a real-world driving emissions test route, that's great, but we're not going to fund anything of that sort. In terms of the business plans, all projects will be expected to demonstrate good value for money. We'll come on to the equation for that a little bit later. Proposals will have to include a schedule detailing the milestones, costs, and then public investment sought. So how much money do you want to spend and when? Projects will also be judged on the business model and whether the plan for creating it is realistic for the long-term operational facility. So we're expecting your business plans to go out to 10 years of operation or more beyond the initial investment. So the completed facilities we were expecting to operate commercially with the users paying a market rate. And it has to be open to several users on a transparent and non-discriminatory basis, including the small and medium enterprises. So your business plans must also demonstrate how the facility is customer friendly, including for international customers. And we expect you to provide suitable facilities to support the test facilities like garages and general logistics, test equipment where it's appropriate. Data management and IT. We've heard a lot about data this morning. But as far as this competition is concerned, each facility must deploy protective security. That's cyber, physical, and personnel by default. Facilities must use consistent and secure data management and communication tools and processes. So the public environments and control facilities funded should make generic data collected during the testing discoverable and available to third-party researchers and developers. We're not expecting you to give away commercial secrets or to divulge confidential information from tests, particularly from commercial customers. What we are expecting you to do is, particularly on the public facilities, is to identify instances or conditions which will challenge autonomous vehicles which have been observed in non-test conditions. So, for example, if there's a junction where people keep pulling out and there are near misses and so on, then we would expect you to highlight that and say, actually, when you have this sort of junction, you have this sort of scenario which is a problem. So please make that information available. So we're not asking for confidential information, but we're asking for useful information which will help develop CAV vehicles. The Meridian 2 competition is funding support for a data exchange to provide comprehensive data collection, storage, and management. And we're expecting that each funded facility would work with that data exchange and contribute towards the national CAV ecosystem in the way that I've just mentioned. Proposals should detail which data and technology standards have been chosen and why, and there may be very good reasons, national standards and so on, or because they've been used in other test facilities. So we expect you to make that nice and clear. And also, if you're using any communications which require licenses, then we should expect you to show how you will obtain those approvals or licenses. If you're using 5G in particular, then you must work with the 5G test beds, and that particular program is being managed by DCMS, and the link is provided again, not only here but in the scope and the GFA. So please have a look if you're thinking about using 5G. In terms of the funding, I'm going to spend a little while on this because it caused some confusion the last time around when we ran the first phase. So the project is funded by investment aid for research infrastructures. So this is, for those who want to know, this is an Article 26 state aid supported competition, not Article 25, which is what normal collaborative R&D is about. So it is a little bit different. And not only do we have state aid requirements, we also have some policy requirements. And together they are providing the rules for this competition. So we're giving support for the construction and upgrade of research infrastructures that perform economic activities. And that is state aid. Where those where those research activities are commercial, you're only allowed up to 50% funding. You're allowed more than that if you are doing non-commercial under state aid rules. But for this competition, we're assuming that all the activity that will happen will be commercial. Therefore, we are only funding to 50%. We're not going to go any further than that. So that's where the policy and the state aid rules come together. So we're only going to fund to 50%. So in terms of funding for the funding support, you can have up to 50% of your eligible costs if you're a business of any size. You can have 100% if you're eligible project costs if you're a non-profit distributing research organization. Now that is not a conflict with what I've just said. Overall, the project will be funded to 50%. So some partners will have to take less than 50% if some are taking more. The research and the RTOs can take more, but if they do, then others have to take less. So again, it's up to you how you decide to balance your project finances. In this case, you have to demonstrate how the match funding is going to work in the facility, and we'll moving on to the next section. We expect the projects to have at least a 30% industry contribution for the initial project costs and 50% over the lifetime. That sounds a little bit complicated. The next slide has a diagram which I hope will make life a little bit easier. So the section to the left is the project build phase. So you can see here, this is a project which we're expecting will cost 10 million to build. So within that project time, you can be funded up to 70%. That means obviously 3 million will have to come out of the industry side. However, from that point onwards, within the next 10 years, you have to match the industry, or the industry contribution has to match the grant. So you have to do follow-on investment into the facility. And that's not necessarily a problem because we all expect technology will move on. To keep your facilities up to date, you will need to reinvest. So that reinvestment can count as part of the 50%. So for example, in this case, we're putting in, there'll be a grant of 7 million, 3 million will be provided by the industry within the build phase, but a further 4 has to be provided over the next 10 years. That makes life easier from a commercial point of view because it means that when you start using your facility commercially and you make a profit or you make a surplus, you can reinvest some of that back in to upgrading your facilities or improving those facilities, and that investment can count as part of your total 50% contribution. So I hope that's clear. If it isn't, please come and talk to me. Moving on to talk a little bit about Meridian. Rich Porter spoke about that this morning, about what Meridian is going to do and how it's going to assist you. I'm going to skip the first paragraph because I've already been through that, other than to say that Meridian has a charter, which basically says how it will work with the various different test facility partners. And the lead from each project has to sign up to that charter. So go and have a look at the charter, make sure you're happy with it. If you're not happy with it, talk to Meridian. If you are happy with it, then you will need to sign on the dotted line after the point at which the project has been approved and before you start to actually start the project. whilst the lead has to sign up, other partners are encouraged to do so. To be honest, if you want to work in a collaborative environment, you'll want to do that anyway. So why wouldn't you sign? So Meridian as an organisation is jointly funded by government and by industry. Meridian is subject to state aid rules, just as the rest of us are. And as such, it can only be 50% funded by government. So it gets its 50% funding from BEIS directly. The industry part is coming from the projects. So the financial contribution from industry is basically coming from 4% of the value of the grant payments from each partner. So you have to pay a chunk to Meridian every time you get a grant payment from Innovate UK. And that is 4%. However, because that money has to come from industry, not from government, it can't be part of your grant claim. So in other words, it's got to come out of your back pocket, it can't be a grant cost. So this is something which wasn't well understood in the first competition and caused a lot of grief. So I just want to make it absolutely clear that you do have to pay 4% of your grant funding value to Meridian at the point where you get that grant funding value from Innovate UK. I think it's within 30 days. So if a partner is unable to fund the contribution to Meridian for a good reason, and in this case, a good reason would be because that organisation is already fully funded by government, for example, then the other project partners will have to provide the shortfall. And we expect that such arrangements would be agreed by the consortium in advance and would be covered in the consortium agreement. So that's another important aspect of a consortium agreement you need to get nailed down before you put your application in. And I'd like to point out that Innovate UK and Meridian have a data sharing agreement to support this. So Innovate UK will be telling Meridian, this is how much that facility is getting in terms of grants, and this is how much each individual partners will be getting. You should go and invoice them for their 4%. Okay, so that is all agreed, it's all in writing, and it all is in compliance with GDPR, of course. So some other aspects of the competition scope. To be part of a project, you must work in collaboration with others. So we're talking about a minimum of 2 partners, maximum of 5. But again, if you want to go more than 5, come and talk to us. You have to carry out your project in the UK, fairly obviously. And you must work through a UK subsidiary if you're not based in the UK. So if you're doing any work outside the UK, that's great, that's nice, supportive, happy for you to do that, but you're not going to be funded through this competition. In terms of subcontracting, you can subcontract, and you can subcontract out of the UK, but you have to justify why your subcontractor isn't part of the consortium. And the assessors are going to be looking for value for money when they assess your projects. They want to know that the taxpayer is getting value in collaborative projects. History has shown that collaborative projects are more efficient, are better value for money than ones which aren't. So we expect collaboration to give us that value for money. And generally, large subcontracts are not perceived as being collaborative, and therefore not perceived as being value for money. So if that's what you want to do, you're going to have to justify it, make it nice and clear. If you're going outside the UK, you have to say why that work cannot be done in the UK. I'm not sure any reason why that would ever be the case, but if there is the case, then you're going to have to justify it. Moving on to value for money. The value for money aspect of each application is going to be reviewed by economists at CCAV. And they will be looking at the cost-benefit ratio as defined on the screen. And the process that they are going to be using has been developed specifically for these CAV infrastructure competitions due to the nature of them. So again, there is a bit more information in the guidance for applicants, not a huge amount, but there is some. But please have a read, because that's important. The eagle-eyed of you who have read the guidance for applicants in detail so far will have noticed that in this competition we have relaxed the requirement that no partner should receive more than 70% of the costs. Stepping back a little bit, if you go and have a look at the state aid requirements for Article 25 projects, the collaborative R&D, to be collaborative, no partner can receive more than 70%. But this isn't Article 25, it's Article 26, and that requirement doesn't stand. However, it is generally recognised that a collaborative project should be no more than 70% funded to one partner. So, as far as this project is concerned, we're not going to enforce it, but if you choose to go above 70% for one partner, you're going to have to justify why and make the case that it is still collaborative and why it is good value for money. Okay, so we're nearly there. I guess you're getting bored of my voice. The final one, variations from scope. We've come up with the scope for this competition based on our best available information. If you develop a project item that doesn't match what we state, but is close, obviously it's completely different, then I'm afraid it's out. But if it's close, come and talk to us and tell us what you're proposing, and we'll think it over and get back to you on that. Because we want to find the best projects for the UK CAV community. Okay, that's it from me. If you've got any further questions, you can come back to me or to Michael Talbot, or ideally go through the Innovate UK section that deals with inquiries. That way they'll be logged and recorded. Okay.
Thank you very much, Richard. Richard is going to be part of the panel anyway, so you can ask him questions then. The next presenter is going to be Jonathan Clough from Highways England.
Thank you. Welcome. Good afternoon. So I'm Jonathan Clough. I'm Programme Manager for Connecting Autonomous Vehicle Trials at Highways England. I must apologise. I think the title we circulated for this agenda item was about this long and very bureaucratic. We'll try and keep the presentation slightly more interesting than that, and then get into the detail when we start building consortia. So today I'm just going to give you a quick overview of why Highways England are interested in connecting autonomous vehicles, why we think this CAV testbed is really important for supporting our strategy, and then what you'll have to do when you want to engage with us to build a consortium. The strategic road network which we run is a protected road. It has differing requirements to local roads due to its high-speed nature, so we really want to work with you to make this work. So firstly, who are Highways England? I'm sure many of you have worked with us before. Those of you who haven't have probably come across us through roadworks on the network and complained to your friends in the pub. But we do a lot. We operate 2% of the UK total length of road, but that carries 30% of the traffic. So really important to the UK economy. What I'll do is I'll run a quick video through that gives an introduction to us much more quickly and succinctly than I could. Hopefully. Did this work yesterday, George? Did the video work yesterday when you checked it? Okay. There we go.
At Highways England, we believe in a
Is there sound?
country. We believe that connecting people builds communities, that connecting families with places creates memories, that connecting workers with jobs creates opportunities, and that connecting businesses helps our nation thrive. Our network makes these connections happen, 4 million a day, and we make them happen safely, reliably, because we're the ones who never sleep, the ones who strive to improve our major roads and motorways, the ones who quietly design and plan, build and run, with pride, care and experience, because our network is vital to the running of the country. We engineer the future to keep people moving today and moving better tomorrow. We've introduced Cockneys to Cornwall and Carlisle to the continent. 4,300 miles driven smarter and smoother. City to countryside, mountain to coast, wherever the people are. What connects them is England. What connects England is us.
So who knew motorways could be so inspiring, hey? I think I showed that video today, very short overview, but it represents 50 years of history. We built the first motorway in 1958, Preston Bypass, for those of you interested. In that time, very little has changed in our relationship with the automotive industry, the sat-nav industry. We've built tarmac, they've built tyres, and that's as close as we got. We see that massively changing with connecting autonomous vehicles, and we see this testbed as a great opportunity to enabling that collaboration. And we think collaboration to develop standards for these technologies is the only way we'll make them work safely, work for our customers, and help us deliver our RIS objectives, which are our 3 imperatives. So quickly moving on, I'll go on to what our challenges are. So I'll quickly focus on 3 for today's presentation. These are all available on the website. Firstly, increasing safety. Highways England runs the safest road network in the UK and one of the safest road networks in Europe. Yet still, over 1,600 people will be killed or seriously injured on our roads this year. That's not good enough. Our vision is to get that to 0 by 2040. We know we can only do that through advances in vehicle technology and working with the automotive sector. Secondly, providing better journeys for our customers. So if we talk about congestion, for example, we know that costs £31 billion a year to the UK economy, according to the Road Haulage Association. We see the data we could get from connected autonomous vehicles to make our networks operate more efficiently as a key enabler to reducing that impediment to our customers. And then finally, supporting economic growth. Currently, for every £1 we spend, it returns £3 to the UK economy. A lot of those costs are big civil engineering projects to add road space. Imagine if we could get the same road space benefits by moving vehicles closer together without the need for expensive infrastructure. We could see that 1-to-3 ratio increase massively. Then the final challenge we have, which I think is a bit negative from our strategy and planning team, I see it as more of an opportunity, is planning for the roads revolution. We know this stuff is coming. It's going to come with or without us. We want to be there to make sure it helps us achieve our strategic objectives. So in terms of our response to those challenges, in October 2017, we reached the halfway point of Highways England. We were brought into existence in 2015 with a 5-year funding plan from the Department for Transport. £15 billion, biggest investment made in the roads since they were built. At the halfway point, we took a step back, published an initial report which considered what had we delivered so far, what did we need to deliver in the next 2.5-year period and into the next roads investment period. As part of that, we developed the Connecting the Country report. This is available online. This identified 9 key trends, everything from mobility as a service, civil engineering advancements, all the way through to connected and autonomous vehicles. In terms of CAVs, we set out 3 key areas for ourselves. Firstly, supporting connected vehicles. We see connectivity as a key enabler to making autonomous vehicles more efficient for the roads authorities. Yes, we know they can work without it, but actually the data they can give to us is really valuable for traffic management purposes. Secondly, we think one of the biggest challenges is the mixed fleet. Everyone tends to talk about this panacea world where you've got fully autonomous vehicles and everything works perfectly. Well, as a roads authority, we're always going to have to design to the lowest common denominator, which for a long time is going to be the human driver. So we're really interested in how the human and autonomous systems interact on our network. And then finally, it's really about understanding what our role is in the development of CAVs. I think as one of the biggest roads authorities in the UK, we've had a lot of clout with our supplies chain traditionally. We've set the standards, they've responded to it. That changes in this area. I mentioned we're spending £15 billion in a 5-year period on the RIS. We know Volkswagen spend $15 billion a year on R&D. We want to work with you guys to leverage that and make it work for UK PLC. As part of the Connecting Country report, and I'm sure this isn't visible, but you can pick it up online, we did some scenario planning. We don't have the answers yet, but these are the different ways we think it could go, and this is what we want to test as part of the Testbeds programme. So, will the network in the future still be a lot like today? Everyone has their own private car, travels around, perhaps it's more efficient because the vehicles move more closely together, but for the most part, very similar business model. Or will we see things at the state-managed end, like mobility as a service? We've called that state-managed. I still think mobility as a service could be led by private industry, but it's more about engagement, vehicle sharing, and things like that. And then the second axis looks at how quickly the technology will be uptaken. Will it happen very quickly? People talk about the next 2 to 5 years. Others talk about 10 to 20, which is more likely. And we hope through running the testbed, we'll be able to run lots of different trials in different quadrants of this plan and help us inform our business cases for future projects. As you can imagine, we're building the Lower Thames Crossing at the minute, big new tunnel under the Thames east of London. That's probably built on a 50 to 100-year business case, yet we don't currently know how these technologies are going to affect that. And we want to start to be able to answer them questions now to allow us to better plan for the future. To date, we've been responding to those challenges through 4 projects we've been developing as part of our programme. First, the A2M2 Connected Corridor. That's delivering CITS connected technology in the southeast between here and Dover, working with some other public sector partners. That's aiming to develop European level standards for the communication technology so that the vehicles can talk to each other when they cross the channel and into other borders, because we're working with partners in France, Belgium and the Netherlands. And we expect that project to be informing European Commission policy. Secondly, UK CITI, which is again working with both public and private sector partners to develop connected infrastructure in the Midlands around the Transport for West Midlands testbed that's already been talked about today. That's really trying to push the boundaries of the technology by working with private industry. Although we might not be developing standards right now, we're able to really push the boundaries of the technology, take data off the CAN bus and understand how that could affect our operations. And then the last 2 are more vehicle trials. Firstly, freight platooning. The technology has been developed abroad. Our piece in that project, our real interest is understanding how freight platoons affect our operations. Do they block exits for other drivers? Do they obstruct signage? Are our structures even strong enough to take such freight platoons? So at the minute, we're doing the off-road studies to understand that before we enable an on-road study. The major outcome will be business models for private industry to use to roll out this technology. And then finally, human drive. That's developing a 240-mile fully autonomous drive, working with Nissan, who are leading that project. Our key role is supporting the development of the safety case, as well as looking at transport modelling, so we can understand how higher penetrations of those vehicles could affect our network. So moving on to our ambitions for this testbed and how we want to move forward and work with you guys. Firstly, we want to build on top of existing investments. We've spent a lot on civil engineering, deploying things like stand-up poles, fibre, power and communications along the A2M2, M40 and M42 in the Midlands. If we can build out from that or on top of that, we can deliver a lot more for the additional funding that's available here, because that's really the expensive piece for us, is the traditional engineering. Secondly, I've talked about already, we want to try and encourage the development of standards-based deployment so that when we're planning those long-term investments, we can start to build this technology in as soon as possible, because our roads are built on, well, our technology is built on a 15-year life cycle and return cycle. But we understand that things have to be commercially viable. We realise that there needs to be a marketplace here, so we understand that won't be possible in every single test case we run. And then finally, we want to use this to inform our future operational strategies. How do our traffic officers work in the future? How do they engage with autonomous vehicles? We've already had instances of Teslas ignoring rolling roadblocks and the driver blaming the vehicle. Now, it's easier for us to stand here and go, well, they should have listened to the code of practice, which said they were in charge. But if people are interpreting the technology like that, that's impacting on our operations now. We had another driver on the M4 who decided to climb into the passenger seat while his autonomous functions were on and start working on his laptop. Could have significant safety disbenefits for us. Next, I guess it's about connectivity and how our network fits with the rest of the network. I guess time to find out if everyone's still awake after lunch. Did anyone drive here today, either fully or for part of their journey? Always difficult question in central London. A few. Did anyone drive their whole journey on the strategic road network, on the motorway network? Did it start or stop somewhere else? Yeah, we're aware that no journeys start on our network. So it's really important as part of this testbed, we work with local authorities, we work with other transport networks to understand how they all interconnect and connect together. But most importantly for us, it's about safety. We've developed our safer system approach, which is helping us to deliver that 2440 vision of 0 people being killed on our network. It's broken down into 3 parts: safer roads, how can we make our engineering design safer? Secondly, safer vehicles, which is what this is about, collaborating with industry to encourage the uptake of safer technologies. And finally, safer people, so encouraging behaviour change programs and educational programs. We think connected and autonomous vehicles can heavily influence those latter two by supporting the driver and making the vehicles much safer themselves. But I think what's critical for us is, although we know there's likely to be long-term benefits, we can't allow any trials to add additional risks to our customers who are there today. This is a live operational network with lots of people using it. Our first imperative is protecting those users and our workers out there on the network. So in terms of summarizing that into a list of requirements, sorry, some of this sounds very techy. It's not overly complex, I assure you, and we can work with you to get through it. Firstly, anyone who works on our network has to be compliant with our construction guidance. That's all available online, but also it's worth engaging partners who have experience of working with us. All our big suppliers are interested in this area. They know it's going to affect them in the future. Can you build a consortium which already has that experience? And we can support you in finding that. Secondly, compliance with our safety processes. So any new trial on our network has to go through what we lovingly call the GG104 process. Anyone who's worked with us before may know this as GD04. We recently renamed it. Sounds very complicated. It's a standard hazard assessment process. It looks at what hazards already exist on the network and then considers how new trials could add to that and make sure suitable mitigations are in place against it. Certainly, the car manufacturers are already doing this. It's just about merging our operational case with their vehicle case. And next is compliance with our Code of Connection. Code of Connection is our cybersecurity standards to make sure that anyone who connects to our fibre network or our power network, which runs along most of our roads, which we'd like to use for this trial, isn't going to affect our operations by adding an additional security risk. Through citing the A2M2, we've already done a lot of work on these two things, so we can definitely point you in the right direction and help to move things forward. We've been working closely with NCSC on this, who presented earlier. And then the last two go without saying, really. We want limited impacts on our current operations or major projects, big investments going on at the minute, so we have to work around them or work with them. Let's get out there with them if they're already doing major construction works, and it needs to be supportive of the strategic aims I presented earlier. In terms of the process for engaging us, it's really quite simple. Engage with me today. We've also got Neil Widdop here from our commercial team who can talk to you, or in Birmingham on Tuesday. If that doesn't work out, we've got an email address you can contact us on and we can set something up. We're willing to support the development of bids we think are sustainable, as in the commercial models there to run it after the trial and for the next 10 years, and that meet our long-term strategic aims. We're going to have to be a bit careful about becoming kingmakers and joining people together, because we think there could be quite a lot of interest in this. So really appreciate if you can come with partly formed or fully formed consortia that we can maybe help you fill the gaps around. And as with any business, final bids will need internal approval at a senior level. We'll manage that. And the minute we have an idea of what the consortiums are, we'll start warming people up to that. And that's all I really wanted to say. If you want to follow up, our email address is available here, or we can speak today or ask in the Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you very much,
Thank
Jonathan.
you.
Jonathan is going to be in the panel with Richard anyway afterwards. Now we're going to have the presentation on the process for applications, and Julie Brown from the Innovate UK competition team is going to join me.
Yeah, my name is not Julie Brown.
Yes.
So me and my colleague Julie Brown, my name's Jonathan. We're going to walk you through the application process for this competition. So like I said, I'm Jonathan. So we're going to go through the eligibility criteria, the application process, the application form, and then I'm going to hand over to Julie, who's going to talk through the funding rules and the assessment and selection process. And then we'll have a QA at the end as well. So to be eligible for this project, you must be a UK-based business or research organisation. You must exploit the work in the UK or carry out the work in the UK. You must be collaborative, and the project costs must be between 1 million and 20 million. And you must be fully operational in 12 to 18 months and must start in March 2019. And for the application form, there are 10 marked questions, and you are allowed to submit some appendices, and I'll go through them in detail. So on the screen is the type of organisations that Innovate UK funds. So we fund small and micro businesses, medium and large, as defined by the EU. And we also fund research organisations, so universities and RTOs and public sector research organisations. And we also support charities doing research as well. So for this project, you must be collaborative, and to be considered collaborative, at least 2 organisations must be claiming grant from Innovate UK. Only UK-based companies and research organisations are eligible to receive funding from Innovate UK. Projects can be led by businesses or research organisations. There is no restriction to the level of the total grant project participation by research organisations. The project grant funding cannot exceed 50% of the total project costs, and you must have at least 30% industry contribution to the initial investment, as Richard said, and at least 50% in industry matched contribution over the 10 years. So on this screen is our timeline for the competition. So it opens on the 4th of June, and the briefing event is today. The registration deadline is the 29th of August. And the competition actually closes, and the submission deadline is on the 5th of September. These dates will be at noon, and this is a hard deadline. We won't accept any application at 12:01. If you do, then it's out. If you're successful and you pass to the interview stage, they'll be on the 21st of September. The interviews will be held in October between 15th and 18th, and you'll be informed on the 9th of November. So we'll now run through the application process. So on our website, there is a section where you can register to apply, and you will be then sent an email with the application process and the application forms, and you'll be able to download those from an secure FTP site, and then you'll be able to complete these and then upload these to the FTP site. Then we'll go through a process of assessment, and then there'll be the interviews, and then the notifications and feedback stage. All of our applications are assessed by independent assessors drawn from industry. So each application is usually assessed by 5. And what do the assessors look for? So they look for clear and concise answers and the right amount of information. So not too much detail and no assumptions. And you must always qualify and justify your answers. And your proposals must present a viable opportunity for growth, a level of innovation that necessitates public sector investment, and has the right team and approach to be successful. So there are a few forms that you'll be required to complete. So there is the main application form and the project finance form. And then you can also submit appendices, which I'll go through in a sec. Any academic organizations will be required to submit a JES form, and they'll all be familiar with that. So we won't be able to walk you through that. So I'll now go through the application form. So this is the overview. So you'll be asked to submit a response to each of these sections. So first of all, you've got the summary of the project. So this summary is not scored by the assessors, but provides an introduction to your proposal for the benefit of Innovate UK staff and assessors. It will not be used for any public dissemination, and it should cover the following on the screen. And also, it's important to remember that this is not scored. Then you've got the public description. So to comply with government practice on openness and transparency of public funded activities, Innovate UK has to publish information relating to funded projects. So you can search online the transparency data that we publish, and every project that we fund is listed there, and it's used, and this is used to inform that. Then we have the scope question. So whether you're within scope, this is marked yes or no. Oh, and I also should say the public description is not marked. This is just a necessity. So back to the scope. This is marked. It's marked yes or no. And to be considered in scope, applications must align with the specific competition scope criteria as described in the relevant competition brief and as Richard stated. So these are the appendices that you'll be able to upload. So you've got Appendices A, which can be up to 5 sides of A4 and in PDF format, and it should support your answers, your answers to questions 1 to 4. Appendices B, also 5 sides of A4 and in PDF format, and it will be used to support questions 5 to 8. Then you've got Appendices C, is up to half a side of A4 for each organisation in the project, and again must be in PDF format. And this one is to supply information, any additional information regarding each applicant organisation. Then you've got Appendices D, which is up to 1 side of A4 and it is PDF format. And this is used to provide additional information to support question 9. And I will go through the questions now. So question 1 is, what is the aim of this facility and what capabilities will it deliver? So the details of the question are on the screen, but I won't go through them all because I'll bore you to death. So I would also refer you to the guidance for applicants. These are all listed here, and as is the whole application process. So if you're ever stuck and you want to go back, the guidance for applicants is the place to go. Question 2, what is the size of the market opportunity? So where does your proposal fit? What share of the market do you believe you can secure? Make sure you show analysis of the proposal strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. Question 3, what will be the impact of the facility? How will you maximize the value from the facility through measures, for example, the time the facility is available for use? How many jobs will be created or retained? Describe how you intend to exploit the facility. Question 4, how will the facility support the Meridian testbed and how will it be developed beyond what is delivered inside the defined project? So how will the facility cooperate with other test facilities as part of the Meridian UK testing community for CAV, and indicate how the facility will further develop or improve beyond the time frame or outside the scope of this project? What is the governance structure and operating model of the facility during operation? For example, reporting lines, milestones, and gateways, and leading KPIs. Question 6, how will the project be managed through the build phase? So identify the main work packages, including the resource, capital, and management requirements. Question 7, what are the risks to the project's success, and what is the project's risk management strategy? There is always a risk in innovation, and the assessors expect to see this. Show how the project will avoid these risks and rate the main risks high, medium, and low, and provide a risk analysis for the project content and approach. Question 8, do the project team have the right skills, experience, and access to the capabilities to deliver the project and identified benefits? So you must detail the track record of each project team member. This will highlight your capability to deliver the proposal on time, to cost, and quality. And we need to see the evidence of genuine collaboration here. Question 9, what is the financial commitment required for the project? So detail a cost plan with details of how costs have been assessed, detail spend profile by month, linked to milestones, gateways, and deliverables as required. Show the expected investment after the project to achieve 50% industry contribution if required. And the final question, how does financial support from CCAV and Innovate UK add value? And this is the finance summary table that we asked to complete. And it is a high-level finance document, and it is what the assessors will see, and it details all the sections available. So I will now pass over to my colleague, Julie, and she'll walk you through the funding rules.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, hi, everybody. Okay, so as Richard's already said, this is completely different than our normal competitions, so please be aware of that at all times. So unlike standard R&D competitions, the maximum amount that any business can claim in this competition is 50% of their eligible costs. Research organisations can receive 100% of their eligible costs, but they need to demonstrate how match-funded investment will be contributed. It should equal the grant funding and can include any maintenance costs. Okay, project participation. The competition is being run under the Investment Aid for Research Infrastructure, which allows grant funding to support the construction or upgrade of research facilities. I feel we're going through these quite a lot, but it's really, really important that everyone is very, very clear on this. So the lead organisation must claim grant. The competition is limited to grant payments of up to 50% of the investment costs. If some project partners are grant funded above the 50%, other partners must provide non-government investment in the facility. This does not have to happen during the project, but must be evident within 10 years from the start of the operation of the facility. Your project must have at least 30% industry contribution to the initial investment and a 50% industry contribution up to 10 years from the start of the operation. Overall, grant funding must not exceed 70% of the eligible costs at the end of the project. There is a little small amount of leeway, as Richard mentioned before, but we really, really would stress this because this is completely different than a normal competition that we run. Please see our guidance for applicants and make sure you read it and understand it. Okay, project finance forms. So we would not expect you to incur any operational costs in this competition. So these tabs should be left blank. You will need to complete the capital costs tabs. These will be the eligible costs you can claim grant against. So in this, each non-academic organisation claiming a grant must complete the project finance form. As my colleague said, any academics complete the JES form, which is completely different. Figures on the individual project finance form must total the same as those on the finance summary table in your application form. This does get a lot of people catch them out. The form does have a tab for each of the cost categories that need to be completed. And as we've said, the cost categories are split into operating, which has a clear O on it, and capital with a C. In this competition, we will only fund the capital costs. And the form must show the status of complete before you submit it. So eligible project costs. These are the eligible costs. In this competition, you can only claim for the capital costs. This includes acquiring or constructing fixed assets. It also includes capital enhancements, which should not be confused with operational costs. Capital enhancement should either significantly lengthen the life of the asset, significantly increase the value of the asset, or significantly increase the usefulness of the asset. Okay, on one of the tabs, capital equipment. In this tab, you should list all the equipment which you'll need to fit out the build project. Property capital cost tab. In this tab, you should list all the costs associated with the build. So this could be land purchase costs, construction costs, professional fees, be it legal, PM, QS design fees, etc. Capitalised labour. In this tab, you should list all of the labour costs that you will incur as part of the build. Do not include labour costs associated with the day-to-day running of the facility. Other capital costs, like it says, this is just any other capital costs that you have. They're not, sort of specific to the other tabs that we've just gone through. And please do not double count. Ineligible project costs. Any costs associated with the day-to-day operations that are not eligible in this project and you cannot claim grant against them. We would expect to see these tabs in the form blank. Okay, next we move on to project costs. This is a single stage competition, so there is a requirement for you to submit a finance form showing your project costs along with your application. So we're going to split it into two, business and non-academic, and then we'll look at the JES form just very quickly. Maybe the other way around. Right, okay. Sorry, that threw me. Why JES? JES is what the research councils use. It's not anything that we support. So Innovate UK do not support the JES system. It's what the research council use. So any JES, any academics in your consortium are fully familiar with this and will be able to do this themselves. But it does need to be sent to us. The completed JES form does need to be sent. So the eligible costs are based on the full economic cost calculation, and contribution is the total cost of academic partners, so that the number there ringed at the bottom is the number that goes into your finance summary table on your application form. We're not just expecting the figures to be sent, they do actually have to send in the justification of resources and the pathways to impact. That's part of the JES form. And like we said, the full details are on the JES system itself. If you have any queries or any issues, or your consortium partner doesn't understand it for whatever reason, please do send them the helpline there. Okay, submitting your application. Like Jonathan said, this is FTP. So when you do register, you will get sent an email, which will have your application form linked to and details of your secure FTP site. You go into the FTP site where you will download your finance documents. You need, and obviously your application form that is on your email. So you fill in your documents, take your time, then upload your documents. Remember, this competition has a two-stage. So the registration period closes on the 29th of August, and then you have 1 week to complete your application form and upload it to your secure FTP site for the 5th of September. As Jonathan said, hard deadline, noon, that's 12 o'clock, noon, a minute past, and you won't be able to load your application up and you'll be ineligible. Invite to interview, as it says on the date page of the competition, and we'll go through that, the invite to the interview, which I think is 21st of August. Okay, this is what the public download site looks like. So you've got all the documents there that you will need. So your finance form, collaboration agreement, and all the competition documentation. So you log into the site. You can see on the top right hand it says login, and use your details that were sent to you in your email. Work on your application form and all your appendices, then you're ready to load it in. So again, using the details sent to you, go into, as we said, the top right. That will be your screen, put your username, your password. Don't forget to tick T's and C's, and then you through to your upload section of the FTP site. So this is where you can put all your documents up. Okay, so when you do complete your submission documentation, please check the naming conventions and the file formats. They're all detailed here. If you do have the wrong format, there is a danger it will get loaded into the wrong directory and it won't get assessed. This does happen. It's the same with any of our documents. Please don't change the format of them. We've had Word documents change into PDFs, and when they upload them to the FTP site, they won't actually be downloaded. They don't pull through, so that person lost their application. We do need all appendices to be in PDF format, so the assessors can view them easily, and they do have page limits, as Jonathan went through, so be very, very careful with that. Okay, feedback and interviews. Technical feedback will be issued prior to the interview panel for both successful and unsuccessful applicants. Applicants going to interview will also receive value for money feedback from the CCAV economists. If you are invited to interview, you'll be told a little bit more of the information on that date, but you will bring representatives from your consortium to answer the questions from the panel. You'll have an opportunity to respond to the technical and economic feedback, so the panel can read prior to the interview. You'll be invited to present to the panel with a Q&A session. The response to feedback, presentations, and the names and everything needs to be provided ahead of the interview, and you'll need to bring a draft collaboration agreement in paper and electronic formats to the interview. Further details will be provided to those applicants who are invited to the interview. So what happens if you're successful? We will send a conditional offer letter after around about 3 to 4 weeks after we have notified you that you are successful. It have a list of requirements that you need to send back to us. You will submit financial forecasts and detailed project plan information. We will then do a financial cost review and viability reviews with our project finance team. We will issue a grant confirmation letter, which you will then review, sign, and send back to us. But please note, the project will or cannot start until the organisation has received and returned signed acceptance of the grant confirmation letter. There's a lovely list of what is actually within the conditional offer letter. Collaboration agreement. This is the document that stops most projects starting on time. It's a very, very time-consuming document. My suggestion would be you start this as soon as you have applied for or registered your interest in going to this competition. You start the collaboration agreement, because it takes forever and it can actually hold up the start of the competition. not competition, your project. Our project finance, we are looking after the public purse, so we have to take checks. So we do viability checks where we look at your management accounts, your cash flow forecast to ensure that the company legally exists, etc. We will also, as a competitions team, do eligibility checks. So it's just looking that you're within the parameters of the competition, so you filled out your forms correctly, and that you are within the project cost parameters, as I said. Grant claims and payments. Finally, you've entered your costs. If you're successful, you can start your project with grant funding, but you need to be aware that we pay your claims quarterly in arrears. So if you're a small organisation, be wise to manage your cash flow because it can catch a lot of small companies out. The pattern of claim payments can impact on cash flows. It's paid quarterly. All the costs have to be incurred and paid between the start and the end of the project. So that is something that you have to be aware of. So very quick. So we'll do a quick Q&A session in a moment. I cannot stress enough, if you've got any issues, whether it be after this session on the process or anything to do with scope, if we don't manage to answer your question on scope, please come through to our customer service department. All our queries through there are audited. We have to answer within a certain time frame. They will all be farmed out to the correct people. So scope will go to Richard, process will come to us. So please do use that support line. Knowledge transfer network, invaluable. And if you need to know anything or would like to know anything else about any of the competitions that Innovate are running at the moment, please do go onto our website and have a look. So that was very, very quick. So I do apologise, but please go onto the website and have a look at the competition in the how to apply. It's got the guidance for applicants. Make sure you read that and understand, and any questions come through to us. Okay, so thank you very much. We're going to do a quick Q&A session now.
Thank you. I believe that Rich and Neil and Michael was supposed to be a part of this. I can pick up it.
Can we sit from here? Sorry. Okay, perfect.
So if anyone has any questions about the competition scope, process, we already have one.
Good afternoon, panel. It's Peter Stoker from Millbrook. Can you clarify why you're not using the Innovation Funding Service and going back to the old system of FTPs? We found a lot of emails that came through went straight into junk mail and we missed them. So I'm just curious as to why you're not using the latest and greatest as you have done with CAVSIM.
So, hi, I'm Neil Ryan. I work in the automotive team at Innovate UK. So there's two reasons for that. One is the underlying state aid framework that applies to this competition is very different. It's not particularly compatible with IFS, how it operates at the moment. And the second thing is the underlying terms and conditions that you sign up to when you click submit on IFS don't include terms and conditions around Meridian. So internally, to get this competition ready to launch now, we've decided not to use IFS on this occasion and use the old system. It's as simple as that.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any other questions regarding, not just for Innovate UK, CCAV, but also for Highways England?
Hello. If a consortium wants to apply for 2 streams, do they need to do 2 completely separate applications or just one?
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. So is it one project that covers both streams? Is that what you're saying? Or, yes, if it's one project, then you would need to apply once. And we would consider that as a linked proposal. But you need to be clear to us as to why you're doing that and why that offers benefits both to you as a project and to us as funders. Richard, have you got anything to add to that in terms of kind of the overall objectives for Meridian?
No, I mean, I think for value for money reasons, but also for sort of long-term collaboration and accessibility, we really want to see proposals that are not only linking between the streams, but also linking to previous investments and previous development, other things within the ecosystem. How that is done through the process, I think, is a matter for Innovate, and I think, that's if that's the line, that's good.
Yeah, I think if it's one project and you see it as one project, then it makes sense to apply for once as part of one project. Stressing why you've gone down that approach and why it's the most appropriate.
If it is two separate projects, you can register once, but then you need to go through customer service department to do a second registration. That's the other thing I just must stress, process-wise.
From the sort of policy perspective, I think it'd be useful just to probably have that conversation as you're developing things with Meridian, Innovate, and CCAV to talk things through. Because just from my perspective, there might be a bit of a risk about putting all your eggs in one basket potentially. So there may be value in putting separate bids into each area. It depends how comfortable you are with a one size fits all. So just throwing that out there.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Sorry, one question for Jonathan at HE. Can you clarify if there's a role in this process for the CAV-PIP consortium, and now that they're your delivery partner for pilot autonomous projects, are they part of assessment or bidding or anything else to go with it, please?
Thank you.
In terms of that, we have a contract with them that we can use on a call-off basis. We haven't yet made a decision as to whether they'd be used for these projects. I think it would depend on what the consortium had together, what kinds of skill sets were required on both our side and in the wider consortium. I think there possibly will be a role in development of bids, but we couldn't confirm it yet. And I think anywhere we've got commercial partners who want to support us in this through their own independent funding, I think that adds value to us because it shows that there's industry and interest and industry investment. But I can't give you a definitive answer, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Any other questions from anyone? You can ask them to CCAV, Meridian, Highways England, Innovate UK.
Forgive me if I zoned out during that bit, but maybe you could explain again what Appendix D is for.
So appendices D is to provide additional information to support question 9.
Yeah, question 9 is funding. Value for money?
Yes, yeah.
Again, this will all be in the guidance document. It is all detailed.
Okay. Any other questions? Look around. None? If no one has any other questions, I believe this is.
I'm not sure if we're winding up in terms of the Q&A, but I wanted to sort of reinforce some of the discussion and points we made earlier about the nature of the scope being more outcomes focused. I think from our perspective, it's really important that we don't crowd out or design out any innovation. We want your best ideas. And I think we cannot emphasize enough how important it is for emerging consortia. If you've got ideas, come and talk to us. If what you're thinking doesn't fit with some of these things, come and talk to us. We don't want to have a rigid system that will disallow a really good idea. So whatever you're thinking, I cannot stress early and open communication with Meridian, Innovate, and CCAV to sort of talk things through.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think we've tried really, really hard to be specific about some of the key outcomes we want to see from these competitions. We've drafted them, and be less specific about the inputs. So yeah, just to echo what Michael says there, if you genuinely believe that you've got something that could be game changing and isn't quite what we've designed or specified here, please do come and talk to us as soon as possible. Yeah.
I have a question because I keep getting asked this question by email. And I think that Richard kind of touched on it. So what are the opportunities for organizations that are outside the geographical area to actually apply into the competitions, or are there any?
There are options for facilities which could be outside the geographical area. We don't want to go too far outside. On the diagram that I showed a little earlier, it showed that the UK CAV Central Testbed actually has a link which goes up to Birmingham, and that is outside the box. But part of that testbed is inside the box. So where it straddles, generally that would probably be okay. Obviously, if it straddled and it went all the way up to Scotland, that would be a little bit different. But within reason, as long as it is in the vicinity of the box, that's probably okay. But if there's any doubt at all about whether you're inside the box or on the edge of the box, come and talk to us, please.
And again, just to reinforce on the policy side of that, the decision is really around creating a really geographically bound ecosystem in which you can find being able to test anywhere in the UK, but having this one area where you've got this over-engineered capacity where you can potentially test something down in London in the morning, something again in the afternoon up in Birmingham. We're not sure if there's any other country in the world that can really offer that suite of capabilities. And we want to continue adding to that. So I think the opportunities for those that are outside the box, and I've had some extremely challenging conversations with people that we've worked with very closely over the years about that challenge. It's collaborating into the box, I think, if that makes sense. So you're not excluded geographically from the consortia. I think we want as wide participation from the UK, from international partners as well. But this element of the geographical focus is a really important policy requirement that ministers have signed up to.
And just on that, just last week we were told by a major manufacturer that this was a major differentiator, and it was a something that why they would consider coming to the UK.
Thank you. So I came in a little bit late, so hopefully I haven't missed something which was important. So Duncan Russell from Ocado Technology. The funding is aimed at building the stuff and not the actual doing or the evaluation of the work to do it. It seems to be the assumption, or maybe you can correct me, that you build the stuff and then you do the work. And building the stuff isn't the end of the story. You don't get it right first time. This is innovation. You're going to get it wrong, and you've got to rebuild it and get the right thing and understand it. Most of the effort is in the evaluation and not the building.
I think Michael or Neil, you want to answer?
Yeah, I could do so. So again, I think when we write the history of CCAV, I think we will write that the infrastructure stuff came first, and then the £150 million of R&D funding came second, and all those great projects ran on top of this wonderful infrastructure. That's not where we are, unfortunately. So the R&D stuff is nearly all out of the tube before the infrastructure stuff has broken ground. So that's just the way things are. By the end of this financial year, we will have fully committed the £250 million of government funding that we've got, with all the industry match that brings with it, which probably takes up to about £400 million, £500 million in total. So we're now starting to look at what is the case, and we've asked Meridian to work with industry to communicate that to us. Is there a requirement for government to do a bit more in the future, or not? Have we done enough? I suspect I know what the industry's answer will be, but we'll wait for them to come back to us with their thoughts.
On that, in terms of sort of defining the future beyond funding we have available. If anyone has strong feelings about what that should include, now's the time to come and ask us, because we are putting together focus groups and panels and figuring out what that be. But there's a short time window of about another month or so on that. So please do come and get in touch with, and I can put you in charge with the sector deal team that are putting that together.
If I can just try and answer your question a little further. When I talked about the funding, we said that you can have up to 70% for the funding for the initial build, but then there had to be match funding of 50% over the next 10 years, or back up to 50% over the next 10 years. That's to cover the exact conditions that you're talking about. We will get things wrong, technology will change, things move on, and the facilities will need to be upgraded. We're not expecting you to pay for that up front, obviously, because you can't, it doesn't exist, but that can be part of your 50% contribution. That's why we've structured the competition in that way.
Okay, sorry. So, I mean, not everything is actually bits of hardware. Most of what we're talking about is connecting things for a service. So again, the ongoing evaluation of this is building and running a service, running data, storing data. I know there's another funding competition for data, but if it doesn't link up with this one, you're going to end up applying for two different competitions, and you might get one and not the other. So what about the most fundamental part of the ongoing cost, or the installation isn't linear, it's not instantaneous. We don't install bits of hardware to do the data. We start gathering data, and most of it we store in the cloud.
Who wants to answer that?
Yeah, so
it's a long question.
And that's an ongoing service cost. It's not something I'm going to pay up.
Yeah, I'll try and tackle that. So that would come under your running costs of the facility when it's up and running, and that's obviously the bit that we expect to be kind of supported by the commercial aspect of the services that you're running. Yeah.
Thank you. Devrim had a question. Sorry, he was waiting for some time.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to complement the previous discussion about the geographical region. I very much like the way you do it. I agree. It's very important to keep in the geography, but it's important to open it to international partners as well, because if we're going to create this technology here and we want to sell it to the rest of the world, we need those international companies, because they're gatekeepers to the clients that we'll look out for in the future. So,
apologies, I had to step out the room, so this may have been asked, but it follow on to the earlier question just now. So in the development of the facility, is the kind of business case scanning to determine that the facility that you build is going to have a market subsequently? Is that an eligible part of the project up front? And is the kind of revenue spend to validate that the facility's sensors and everything works and operates such that you can then market that facility as a Meridian testbed facility going forward? Is that an eligible cost to be done within the timescales of the project?
Just on the sort of, I'm going to answer a different question, and I'm going to pass on to ask you your actual question. It's a UK testbed as Meridian, as the facilitator around collaboration. It's your test facility with a unique brand that works with the others, I think, so it's not a Meridian testbed, it's your testbed.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky question, Robert. I think the answer would be that it depends on whether the costs can be capitalized. That's ultimately what we're looking for in this competition. So we need a couple of accountants in the room to help us fully answer that. But yeah, for us, we're looking at eligible capital costs over the course of the initial period of the project.
So that's a major differentiator from a traditional R&D project.
It's very different to a collaborative R&D project. Now, we would expect collaborative R&D projects to come along and use the facilities when the facilities have been built, and then those costs for the costs of the collaborative R&D project are funded from that collaborative R&D project, not from the Meridian 3 funding.
Hannah Castleton, Transport for London. In some of the slides earlier today, it mentioned that a draft collaboration agreement has to be submitted at application. And in one of your final slides, it said it should be signed. Which one is it?
A draft has to be provided for your application, and then if you are invited to interview, you need to bring that along in paper copy and electronic. But if you are successful, that's when you need a signed. So once you've got your conditional offer letter, part of your grant offer will be the fact that you have a signed collaboration agreement. It can take a phenomenal amount of time, but as you know, you'll be notified that you're successful. 3 to 4 weeks after that, you'll get your conditional offer letter, and then we need to do viability checks, so it can take another week or two. So I would say within about 6 weeks of being notified, you should have your grant offer letter, and you should have your signed collaboration agreement ready. Oh, okay, hang on.
So I think if we're seeing delays that we don't understand, we have looked at inviting projects to meet with us to explain the nature of those delays with sufficient wording to provide that sense that it needs a bit of movement. If I can provide as gentle an explanation as possible.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I think we have time for 1 or 2 maximum. Thank you. Sorry.
Hi. I want to understand what is the process in place to make sure the proposal evaluators are qualified to evaluate the proposal. Because I'm Ramit from Honda.
Yes, so for each competition that we run, we bring together a pool of independent technical assessors. So the competition pool of assessors in this case is unique, and it's across the range of expertise that Innovate UK can draw on, particularly around obviously automotive expertise, around connected autonomous vehicles as well. So as part of the Innovate UK process, we'll make sure that 5 independent technical assessors are assigned to each bid. That's done to reflect the skills of the assessors and what the bid has as in terms of its technical content. That will be a mixture of people with different skill sets to make sure we get a balanced review on that individual application. The technical assessors, again, are people that we've used over a number of years in a range of automotive and CAV competitions. So we know that they are expertise, or they have expertise in the field. That's then done through the Innovate UK process. We then have a separate pool of assessors, or a subset, sorry, of that pool of assessors then support us at the interview panel stage. And again, because we're looking to make sure that we fund the best proposals, we look to make sure that we've got the right people with the right skills to assess the bids that we get.
Thank you very much. One last question. We only have time for one last question. So.
A bit of a basic question was because there's a sort of innovation / R&D component to some of this. If you apply for the grant funding, would particularly like sort of smaller or any R&D team that's involved, would they still be eligible to apply for, like, for example, R&D tax credits, or would that fall out of the any work that's part of this competition?
Yeah, so again, you should get advice for your company, but my understanding is that there's no overlap. The R&D tax credit system has its own approval process that's completely distinct and separate to the grant funding mechanisms that we administer. So there should be no overlap. But again, each company needs to seek separate legal advice, basically. But the general principle is that there's no threat of duplication.
Thank you very much. That was the last question, so I would like to thank the panel for taking the time to answer all the questions. I believe Rich has a few words about the hackathon to say at the end. But yes, thank you everyone for taking the time to reply to all the questions. And we are waiting for you on Monday for the data competitions and on Tuesday for the same event that we had today, but in Birmingham. And pretty much that is it. And thank you for being here today. We know it's a Friday, so it must be. Thank you again for being here. Cheers.